Okay, so in this presentation, I'm going to be discussing gender inequality in the music industry, and I'm also going to be exploring the rock music industry more specifically as well. So I'm going to touch on male dominance in the music industry as a whole, but I'm also going to be talking about rock bands and male dominance in rock and sexism within the music industry, facts and figures, and a few festival lineups, and also is there a solution to gender inequality within the rock music industry and the industry as a whole, and what we can do as humans, as people, as music lovers to bridge the gap, the gender gap. So the music industry is actually one of the only industries that's socially acceptable to discriminate against women. And many studies have taken place to discuss the discrimination, but there's been no real signs of any gender gaps closing. And women in Western music culture have actually found themselves somehow subjected to the power of patriarchy. And so the music industry almost creates a problem for them as well as a platform, in that it gives them a voice and an opportunity to be creative. But it almost continues to sustain a phallocentric idea and a phallocentric approach to these creative ways and how they should perform them. And I'd just like to have a quick look at the lyrical content and the demeaning nature of lyrical content, and briefly just want to talk about music videos and music videos featuring a lot of female nudity. And I'm sure that you've seen videos on YouTube or MTV or platforms similar to that, where the woman has been dancing around almost completely naked, or with a man who is the focus of the video, but in fact the women surrounding him who are taking their clothes off almost have that are the focus. And I'd just like to dig a little bit further back in time as well and talk about Prince. And he was a fantastic artist, and I'm actually quite a fan of him. And he had quite a few songs throughout his career that were slightly controversial if you really examine the lyrics. And I want to take Do Me Baby for one, and that was her B-side song, and it was never released as an A-side. And it was quite a slow and sensual song, so I feel that the lyrics almost masked the vulgar nature of the lyrics. The song almost masked the vulgar nature of the lyrics, and the vast majority of Prince fans were women, at the time. And if we look at Let Me Feel You Up, it was a fantastic song, but again, the lyrics are never really particularly examined, and I feel that they're not particularly female friendly if you look at them closely. But I feel that at such a point in time that Prince fans were so into him and they looked up to him as such a wonderful figure, and I feel that they were more interested in his music as opposed to the lyrics. But if we take a look at Robin Thicke's Blurred Lines, I'm sure everybody will remember the controversy and the uproar that Blurred Lines caused when it was released. And even the title of the song itself is controversial, and it almost suggests that there's a confusion between what a woman says and what a man interprets by what she said. And he uses lyrics such as "I know you want it" in that song, and it's almost it offended many people, especially victims of sexual assault. And he implies that because a woman's not responding to a man's sexual advances, that she may be hiding a true desire under her disinterest. And that's not exactly true. And I understand why I'm not a Robin Thicke fan, but I can see why that would have caused issues and controversy. So just an observation of mine as well. In entertainment, TV series, media, films, the man is often the head of an organization, a company, the CEO, or perhaps a manager, or a role that's quite high up. And the woman usually plays the role of the wife or the secretary, which is usually underneath the man. You never really see a woman. In a few films, not particularly a lot though. It's more sort of the norm for a man to play the role of the CEO of a company or such like. So just a few facts and statistics here. Women make a great contribution to the industry, music industry as a whole, and I'm going to talk about Alison Wenham as well a bit further down this slide. But they're not often sufficiently celebrated, or their work goes quite unnoticed. And Creative and Cultural Skills, I did quite a bit of research on them, and they are a website that provide young people particularly, but anybody really is welcome to work with them. And they they provide skills and a voice and a bit of confidence for people to work in the creative industry. And they reported in 2013 that the gender divide across music industry related jobs was 67.8% male to 32.2% female, and also that the vast majority of people working behind the scenes, so the cameramen filming music videos, or even down to the admin in a record label, it was still male, and it was 66% of that majority, and that were male. And in London as well, women represent only 30% of that. So that was in 2012. I'm sure a few statistics have probably changed since then, but not significantly enough to notice any difference. In 2010, 47% of women in the music industry earned less than £10,000 a year. Now, that is a shocking statistic, less than £10,000 per year. And also that 6% of women in the music industry earned more than $29,000 compared with 22% of men. That's also a huge difference, 6% of women and 22% of men. So, as I mentioned before, Alison Wenham is the CEO and chairman of the Association for Independent Music, and she called a meeting to discuss the figures that had been shown for the past few years, and she held that meeting in Club Cargo in Shoreditch. And she's a very powerful woman, and she almost is a representation of what women strive to be, and how she's an example of how if you work hard and you educate yourself, and you don't let anybody get in your way, that you can become someone, you can become a CEO, you can become a chairman as a woman. It's not necessarily a gender specific role. So Carly Smith is a music industry blogger who I follow quite closely, and she analyzes gender inequality in the music industry, and she posts some fantastic things. And this was one of her blogs. She created this infographic, and because I haven't really touched on the performing side of things and just sort of more focused on the music business, but I wanted you to take a look at this one. 68.8% male to 32.2% female performers in the music industry in 2013. And yeah, so it's almost similar to the statistics that we'd seen with the behind the scenes working in the music industry, but this reflects the performers. And also, if you have a look as well, 34 out of 287 acts had been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame have had a female performer or been a female solo artist. 34 out of almost 300 is quite a significant difference. And if you just quickly glance your eyes down to the right bottom box, out of the 30 top highest paid musicians of 2014, only 9 of those were female. So that means that 21 of them were male. So that's, again, huge difference between the two. Okay, so we all know that throughout the 70s and 80s there was a lot of rock bands emerging, and a lot of glam, and the rock and roll lifestyle was quite something else, really. And early 80s and throughout the 70s, many women actually became bona fide rock stars as well, and there was almost a gender shift in the equality of genders throughout the 70s and 80s, and that the woman almost became more confident to come forward and become a rock star, and they paved the way for more female artists to be at the top of the charts in the rock music industry. And those women were a huge influence on the male artists of their time. And if we take a look at Stevie Nicks, for example, and Fleetwood Mac, if you're not a fan of Fleetwood Mac, you're not going to really know what Stevie Nicks did for Fleetwood Mac. But she almost helped them to develop as a band, and she wrote many songs for them, and she was almost the front woman for quite a little bit of time, and she influenced them a lot and helped them to grow as a band. And many people don't, she goes unnoticed quite often when Fleetwood Mac is mentioned. So on to successful rock bands then. There's so many out there, I can't really name every single one of them, but here are a few that sprung to mind. Queen up there, AC/DC, Led Zeppelin, Nirvana, Queens of the Stone Age, Metallica, Sex Pistols, Ramones, so many of them. Now I'm just going to ask the question here, what do these bands have in common? Is it maybe fame or talent or success, money maybe? Well, the simple answer to this question is that they're all male. And I just want you to have a quick look at this next slide as well, and the images that we can see on screen. And if you take a look here, we've got Queen, we've got Green Day, Sex Pistols, Queens of the Stone Age, and so on and so forth. And if you just have a look at these images really quickly and keep hold of those images in your mind. And I'm going to quickly move over to this next slide and ask the question, could you name 50 female-fronted rock bands that have had worldwide global success? And I'm a rock fan myself, and I couldn't really name 50 off the top of my head, but I could name a few here, and early No Doubt, Joan Jett and the Blackhearts, Evanescence, Garbage, Pretty Reckless. But what I want you to do here is just specifically glance your eyes over to the right and have a look at the images of the women on screen. And just compare those to the previous slide of the male bands. And I'm going to ask the question if you've spotted the difference there. And what I'm trying to say is, could beauty or the way that a successful woman in rock looks influence her success over her musical capabilities? And I think the answer to that question is most definitely yes, it could. Now, Santee Gold is an American singer-songwriter and producer. She's a black woman in music, and she has very similar views to mine on an image of a woman almost gains her, it helps her to have success in the music industry. And I can't show the clip here for some reason, because if I click on it, it doesn't open. But I want you to have a look if you get the time in your own time. It's a great clip, and she, in her interview, says that she doesn't represent that as an artist. She doesn't feel that she needs to take off her clothes to be successful. She feels that her musical capabilities actually overlook that. And she said that a lot of women feel that it is the way to be successful in the music industry. And whilst it might not be strictly untrue or true, I think that many women feel that way because of the norm, or because of what's socially acceptable in society today. I just want to move on as well to Reading and Leeds Festival. And I mean, lots of articles and discussions surrounding Reading and Leeds, and there's been a lot of discussion about its lack of female artists throughout the years, and how women have been highly underrated at Reading and Leeds. And considering that the BBC are really heavily involved in the organisation and the procurement of artists for Reading and Leeds, you'd think that we'd hope to see a better representation of the general population. And I'm going to show that in the next slide, but almost 100 acts played the festival over the 3 days. And I'm just going to show you these posters here. Now, on the left-hand side is the poster that went out to the public with the full lineup on the dates that the bands are playing. And on the right-hand side is removing all the acts from that poster that are male. And we're just left with 9 feature female acts. So that means that the entire lineup on the other side there are entirely male. And again, if we take a look at Download Festival of the same year, the lineup again on the left, the full lineup with all of the bands, and if you remove the male bands, we're left with more or less the same amount of artists, female artists. And I mean, Download is a male-dominated festival anyway. You're literally surrounded by sweaty metal fans that are, they have their shirts off, and it's predominantly male. So how do we solve this problem then? Statistics are really history in the gender equality debate, and we definitely need to bridge the gap that's been created in the music industry and dig to the bottom and find out what really is the reason behind women holding back from being successful in the rock music industry in particular. And there's a lot of successful female artists. I'm not arguing that, but what I'm saying is, in the rock music industry specifically, it is a male-dominated industry, and we need to find out what the real reason is behind what the reason is for that actually happening, and what it is actually causing that to happen. And I feel that the industry doesn't reflect the world that we are living in today. We as humans are we're developing, and we're constantly growing to understand and accept one another for our sexuality, or for our gender, or our age, or our race, And I feel that the industry really doesn't, the music industry and the rock music industry in particular doesn't really reflect that. And I think that CEOs and executive producers of labels and managers of labels could really encourage more female talent to come forward, and especially in rock, and no matter what they look like, or it should be more their musical capabilities than anything. And Women in Music were founded in the 80s, and they're a non-profit organisation in the USA, and they help women to do that. They help women to have a voice and to come forward with their musical capabilities and creativities and their songs, and almost have a voice through song. So to conclude then, the issues and topics that I've raised here may not have been something that you've had the time, or you've really thought about at great length. And I hope that the information that I've provided will be enough to create some sort of thought process in relation to the topic. And I want to just ask the question that if gender equality existed in the rock music industry in particular, would the way that artists are promoted and marketed be any different? Would the music industry be better off for it, especially in rock? And I think that it would. And I definitely, for one, would really like to see a music industry that reflects the general population and how far we've come as people in gender, age, and ethnicities as well. Thank you very much.